ma'am, let's start from the beginning. Like, tell us about your childhood and what that was like for you.
Sure. I grew up in a single parent home. It was a very broken home where my mother was never home. She was bringing different men to the house, and she just really had her own agenda in life. She wasn't ready to be a mom. Throughout my adolescent years, I was raped several times by family members, would include my grandfather and my uncle. I experienced a lot of physical, emotional, sexual, verbal, mental abuse from my family entirely. So it was pretty rough.
Wow. Well, so then how did you get trapped in trafficking, and what was that like for you? How did you get into that?
Sure. So really, the rapes continued to happen until my teenage years. At that point, I became a very defiant youth. I started to get into a lot of trouble, a lot of juvenile delinquency charges. So I was put into the system, DJJ, it's called there, which is Department of Juvenile Justice. And I would start doing time inside the jails and things like that. And eventually, I would go through foster care and DJJ until I aged out. And once I aged out into homelessness with no place in plan, nowhere to go. And one day I was at a gas station, and that's where I met my first trafficker.
What were some of the things that you were asked to do, and what were some of the things that you had to do just to?
Sure.
Yeah.
So some things that I was asked to do was to work extensive hours. That could be anywhere from 14 to 18 to 20 hours a day with only 4 hours of sleep. I had to work 6 days a week, sometimes 7 if I didn't meet my quota. I had a quota every night, and I had a quota every week, and that had to be met. And so I was forced to work in, strip clubs, high call escort girl. I was forced to, again, just to travel in all the different places where, the sporting games go, or the conferences, and just big things like that bring in money. And during that time, I was beat and tortured a lot. I was sold 5 different times to 5 different traffickers.
So what are some of the things that happened during that time that we might not recognize is happening in a trafficking, in a pimp and person who's trapped in trafficking kind of relationship? What are some of the things that are happening in there?
You mean like?
Yeah, like what's that relationship like for you? How does that relationship feel like, and what is going on in that?
Okay, so from my experience, when I first got involved with it, of course, when he started trafficking me, he groomed me for 3 weeks. Let's just start there. Okay, so the grooming process is where he would, take me out to eat, get my hair done, my nails done, things like that. It's the lack in love and attention that I wanted from home that I didn't receive. And so after that, he was like, "Do you want to travel?" So I was like, "Sure, of course." I've never even went on a family vacation in my life, so traveling sounded really good to me. Little did I know he would take me to South Florida, and he would bring me to a hotel room, and there would be his bottom girl. His bottom girl is somebody that's been there for a while, where she's kind of earned the position to come alongside him so much, And during that time, I can remember, like, that survival mode of, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to get out of here? Like, something's terribly wrong. A motel room does not come with a girl in it. So I knew something was super suspicious, but at that point, that's when, the abuse began, and he was like telling me how things were going to go at that point. I was very in fear at that time and wanted to leave and had the desire to leave. But over, an amount of time, I was trafficked over 5 years. So as time goes by, you lose hope of getting out. So you really, instead of wanting to get out, you now become loyal to him. Because of the psychological and mental abuse, you gain Stockholm syndrome, and you start gaining a trauma bond to him. So, you want to be his bottom.
Yeah. So you said you were in relationships with 5 different traffickers. Like, what are the kind of tactics they're using, and how are they trying to brainwash you and control you and create this trauma bond?
Yeah, of course. So some of the things that they do to you is, first of all, there's three different types of pimps out there. Let me explain those just very briefly. There's a Romeo pimp, there's a gorilla pimp, and there's a CEO pimp. And so I'll define a little bit of what each one of them means. A Romeo pimp is someone that rules by love. A gorilla pimp is someone that rules by fear and violence. And a CEO pimp is more someone that is like business type. And so I had a variety of each of those during my time of being trafficked. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
what was the second part of
Just
that?
like what? How do they try to create that trauma bond with you? What are they doing to
Yes.
brainwash you?
Yeah, so some of the things that they do is they use truth with lies. Let me give you an example in my case. During the grooming process, he knew my whole life story. He knew that I came from the project's low-income housing. He knew that I did not have family that cared about me. He knew the basic necessities that I needed in life to survive. So he knew all these very little details that really I needed in life. So what he would do is he would then brainwash me down to a point where he would say things like, if you try to leave, I will come and I will find you and I will kill you, and nobody's going to look for you, because who's looked for you yet? You have nowhere to go. You have no way to take care of yourself. True, right? I was homeless when he found me. Everything he's saying is the absolute truth. There wasn't one lie to what he was saying. But where he twists it with a lie into manipulating me into thinking that he's really telling the truth, right? When truly there probably was some kind of way that I could get out. But
Yeah.
when you're vulnerable like that, I mean, that they have a really way of, making the lies sound real.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how did you finally get out of that situation?
Yeah, so my last pimp that I was with, he was a gorilla pimp. He ruled by fear and violence, whereas the first one was a Romeo one. And he took me to Platinum Plus in South Carolina, and I had a quota to meet for that week, and I was just a little bit shy of it, just a little bit. And so one of his things that he enjoyed doing was beating his girls and throwing them out. And because that was, again, part of his brainwashing. He would beat you and throw you out, but then he'd come back and get you. And what it would do is cause fear every time to set in, But this time, when he threw me out, his driver that was driving, instead of getting on 75 to take me back down south, accidentally missed the turn. Accidentally, right? But I know that was God. Mm-hmm. Went on I-10. Little did he know I was from I-10 in Panama City, Florida. Mm-hmm. And so when he threw me out that time, it was like this bravery came over me to hitchhike, even though that's not really safe either, right? But at this point, I'm in survival mode and I really don't care. It was either a moment of living or dying. I was either going to die trying to get out today, or I was going to continue to, live in that, which was honestly, well, it was a nightmare anyways. So It really didn't matter. So he threw me out. I hitchhiked back to Panama City. And he did coordinate with the other pimps and, figure out where I came from. And he did look for me. And, it got pretty scary. People started getting scared because they started to see, same vehicles driving by. And they're like, listen, you can't stay here. This is just too much risk for me and my family. Yeah. So I had to leave.
Yeah. So then I know you go on into a different kind of trafficking situation as you leave that situation. What was that like, and how did that happen as well?
Yeah, so what happened after that was I ended up, when they said I had to leave, homeless again. So I didn't know anything, guys. I mean, I had no education. I had no family. I had nowhere else to go. I was literally in survival mode on my own. And so I went and started exploiting myself again in a club. I started going back to the nightclubs, and I started dancing and stuff because that's all I knew. And it was there that I met a drug trafficker. I didn't know that he was a drug trafficker at the time. And mind you, he's not just a drug trafficker. He was the head of the cartel. He was the very top. And And so at that time, one night he gave me what I thought was the opportunity of my lifetime. And that's when he was like, do you want to leave this life behind and, just get out of this world? And of course, I wanted that more than anything,
Yeah.
even though I didn't know what that looked like. So that relationship would continue for several years and turn into a domestic violence relationship.
Yeah. Well, how did you finally come to know the Lord, and what was that like for you, and how did that change the trajectory of your life?
Sure. So after a lot of the domestic violence, one time I just had this, mustered of courage again. And I was like, I'm just done with this. I'm over it. My whole life was full of nothing but trauma after trauma after trauma. Even though I didn't know what that word meant at that time, I just knew that it was full of pain and hurt and insecurities and feeling unsafe. So I decided to leave one day, took all my stuff. I had actually befriended the trash man. Yes, the trash man. And during that time of making the friendship with him, I told him one day, I said, hey, I really want to leave him. I was like, I want to get out of here, but I don't have anywhere to go. He's like, you can sleep on my couch. You can come with me. And so I said, okay. So I left, and I started sleeping on his couch. Well, little did I know, this cartel drug dealer had a GPS on me. He had it on my phone. So he came and found me right away. Decided one night after he was consumed by alcohol that he would just decide to drive his Mercedes right through this man's front living room. And he didn't care. He had, a ton of money to hire lawyers and whatnot to handle his legal fees. So anyways, after that all happened, of course, the guy had to call the cops. I mean, he needed his homeowner's insurance and stuff to pay for the damage that was done,
Right.
And to file a case. And so the cops came out. They spoke to me. He wrote the case number on the card. And this was the first time in my life that a cop had ever done anything right for me.
Yeah.
Up until this point, I had had survival sex with cops. They would threaten me and say, if you don't give me favors, I'm taking you to jail tonight.
Yeah.
Things like that. So going back to the card, I flipped the card over and it said Grace Family Church on the back of the card.
Yeah.
And didn't take action on it at that time, but I kept the card. I shoved it, in my wallet. Around that same time, I ended up getting sick. I thought I had a common flu. Spiked a high fever. It wouldn't go away. Ended up checking myself into an emergency room, only to come to find out that I had gotten so sick and got an infection. My kidneys were shutting down, and I had 1 day to live. They literally told me, had I not got to the hospital that day, because I didn't go all the other days when I was sick, thinking I just had the flu. I was literally on my last 24 hours of being able to live.
Yeah.
And so they pumped me full of meds. They got me better. I stayed a week. And when I got out, I found out that he had came back to the house, told the guy, I bought all that stuff she has there. That was my money. So I'm taking all that stuff. And if you don't give it to me, there's going to be issues. And so, of course, the guy don't want no problem. He's like, fine, dude, just take it. And so he let him have it. And so when I got out, I had nothing. I was back to homelessness, absolutely not a piece of clothing on my back, nothing. And it was that card I pulled out of my wallet one day, and I said, Grace Family Church. You know what? I don't have anything to lose. I have absolutely nothing to lose. Why not try it?
Yeah. Well, what kind of relationship developed when you went to Grace Family Church, and how has that, again, changed the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, so when I walked in, I was, my goodness, completely dehumanized. I didn't even know how to be a person. I remember having on this huge sweater with this big old hoodie, and I would put it on so far that you couldn't see me. I could just see where I was walking, and I would kind of look up to see where I was going, and I would take myself all the way to the top tier, and I would sit in the back, and I didn't want to be bothered. I didn't want nobody to talk to me. Nothing. I didn't know how to interact with people, because during the time of being trafficked, I was made to not socialize, can't have contact with friends or anything like that, so I really had isolated so much that I couldn't even hold eye contact or nothing, so a lot of shame and guilt and things, but however, the associate pastor there would start seeing me coming in every week, weekend. And then I also got involved in a small group. It was called Beauty for Ashes. It was for healing emotional wounds, physical pain, sexual trauma, things like that. And she seen me coming and coming and coming, and she knew something was wrong with me. She knew I was broken.
Yeah.
And her exact words to me one day was, "Sweetheart, I don't know what you've been through, but I know you've been through something." And she goes, "I can't necessarily help you. I can love you, and I can be here for you." She goes, "But I do know an organization that can help you." And she's like, "I'd love to connect you with them if you're, willing to take the resource." And so they reached, we touched base the first time. And just like any trafficking survivor does, I totally stiffed her. I didn't go meet her. I told her I would, and I didn't. I didn't show up.
Yeah.
But the next time, I did. I had that strength to show up. And so that's where it all began.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Kim.
Sure.
We're going to call time out here. We're going to invite our worship team to lead us in a song. We're going to invite you guys to text in some questions for Kim, and we'll process them afterward. And this is a song that Isaac wrote. So, Isaac, lead us in a reflection. Right. Well, Kim, we are going to answer some of the questions that our students have. Okay? Here's our first question. How can we recognize people who are victims of trafficking, and what steps can we take to help and support them?
Yeah, good question. So some of the obvious signs that I always say is, if you see a boy or a girl, man or woman, that for one do not have documentation, and that can even be so much as their ID, right? I know that my traffickers took all my identification every time, and they do that so you can't take, an airplane, you can't take a bus. I don't have a car. I had no way to get around anywhere. So it's things like no documentation. They could have a branding. A branding can mean a tattoo, a stamp, a barcode, a certain symbol. Nowadays, I'm going to tell you they're putting the number 16 on the back of their neck, somewhere that's visible, because it lets, there's a whole dark web out there, right? And I know that you guys know somewhat about that. So they go on these sites and things like that, and if the girls automatically have a 16 on them, it lets them know. So let me tell you what number 16 means real quick. It's the 16th letter in the alphabet, which starts with P, so that means that they're pimped. Then there's also 305 that you can see on them. Most people are like, oh, that's just area code, Miami, right? Yeah. No, it's not. Flip it upside down, and it's a word. Let's just say HOE. And that lets people know when they go on these websites that they're a product. So there's different kind of, brandings. I did have one of those. Thank goodness I got it covered up. So it's brandings, identification. If she looks malnutrition, malnourished. It can be physical signs of beatings and things like that. Also, if she can't speak up for herself, if you notice that she cannot answer any questions, she can't, have any kind of contact with you, somebody else is speaking up for her. Also, body language is completely shut down. Again, remember what I told you. I walked around like this because that. When you're being trained by them, that's what they teach you. You cannot make eye contact with nobody. You can't look at nobody else in the eyes. You can't do any of that. So they'll completely lose body language as well. So those are some of kind of the obvious signs. Some steps that you can take to help and support them is, honestly, there's tons of organizations now. I say do your research in your local community and reach out to them. Everybody has volunteering opportunities. And maybe just ask God what that looks like for your assignment on your life. How can you get involved to make a difference?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Here's another question. How would someone notice who a trafficker is?
Yeah, that's a tough one because traffickers don't come with, the old cane and the pimp hat. Most of the time they're well-groomed men. They have nice cars. So let me give you some of the little examples that will really stick out to you. If you notice that there is, a guy or maybe even, guys, I know it can be hard to tell the difference, but you'll kind of notice, again, so if it's a guy that has a bunch of girls, why is he with so many girls, or boys, and it's just one? And also try to look at the age, because now they're getting them younger and younger. The average age for a victim to be trafficked is between 12 and 14 years old. So, and they truly are. I have many cases because I go into safe houses and things like that, where my girls and boys, they're literally 10 years old. So, if you see young children, again, with older men, if you see girls or boys that are, young, and they have cell phones, they have their nails done, they have expensive clothes on, things like that you just know that age range, there's no way that they could have all that expensive stuff. Yeah. Those are some telltale signs as well. So it's just really keeping your eyes open and being observant. Again, if the girl with him or boy can speak up for themselves and stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Here's another question. Was it hard for you to develop a relationship with God after he allowed you to go through so much suffering?
It was at first. I didn't understand. I had so many questions, so many details of my life that I just didn't understand. I said, if you're a loving God, how could you allow me to go through all this? We weren't even able to get into all my story really, but by the time I was, out of 5th grade, I had already watched my brother be murdered, and then the grandpa that was raping me died in front of me. That's already 2 deaths. Mind you, I live in the projects and I hear gunshots go off 24/7, and I'm watching people just flop and die. So that's a lot of traumatic experience outside of being alone, being abandoned, being raped. Why, God? Why? If you love me so much, why did I have to go through so much pain? And I didn't understand the purpose of me being born, honestly. And that's just me being honest with you guys. So it wasn't until I sat down and truly allowed God to start healing me from the inside out, my heart, my soul, and him placing people in my life, which is why I said get involved with an organization and make a difference, be a mentor, be big brother, big sister type thing. If I would have had that, maybe it could have even changed the trajectory of my life of being trafficked if somebody would have just spoken to my life and loved on me, right?
Yeah.
So it was very hard. Yeah.
Here's another question. What has been the healing process been like, and how has your relationship with God been part of that?
Each day, each moment, each week, each month, each year, it's just layer after layer after layer. It's intense, but you have the choice. And this is what God showed me in the very beginning, after I got all my angry, fist-shaking questions out of the way. I can either stay in that same life and continue to re-exploit myself and to never get better, or I can choose God's way, and I can trust him, and I can figure out, what's better, to stay where you're at or to try it God's way. So my healing process is, again, taking it moment by moment. But obviously you see, I'm here, I'm healthy, I'm whole, I'm breathing, and God is using me for amazing things now. And so they're no longer questions of why did I go through it, but it's now I see why I went through it, because there's so many other hurting people out there that's going through the same thing, and they need someone to come up alongside them, So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Sure.
Here's another question. How did you learn to trust any man or anyone again after being wronged by so many people?
That's hard. That's really hard. That's why, honestly, I had to sit with God for a long time.
Yeah.
Guys, I've been with God for years, and I didn't trust men for a long time. I didn't want any men around me. Yeah. I really had a hard time with that. That was probably one of my biggest barriers. But again, it was God speaking to me through his word. And he would just literally, the scripture would jump off the page at me. And I would just soak it up. And I started, okay, so I couldn't get a job forever. I was like going online and I was trying to like put in all these fake resumes. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah.
But I wanted to work. I needed to do something. I was
Completely.
trying not to go back to that life. So I was
Yeah.
putting in all these resumes. And I was getting nothing back. And I was like, oh my goodness. But anyways, I see the point of it now because I would literally take that Bible that the church gave me and I would just read the scriptures. And again, I didn't even know it at the time, but I look back at my journals now. I rewrote the whole Bible, y'all. So it was God engraving his word on my heart.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing during that time.
Yeah.
He was rewiring my brain and saturating his love through his word to me. And it was there that he taught me to trust. It was there he was like, if you can learn to trust me first, then I can teach you how to trust other people in a healthy way. So it's that healing process.
Yeah. Here's another question. What is the best way for us to help those who have suffered traumas as you have?
The best way, I would say, it really comes back to the mentor role, you know. It really comes back to, because that's what helped me the most. They need a strong support system. And so again, I don't know what that looks like for everybody. I would say that's something that you go home and you pray to God about, and you ask him what's your role in it, because everybody has a role. You know, we're all called to action. We said that we were made to be his disciples, to go out. He didn't say be my disciples and sit still and do nothing. That's not what he said. So ask God, what's your part in it? What does that look like? You know, and he'll let you know. He showed me mine.
Yeah. All right. Here's another question. How can we best help and spread awareness about people being trafficked?
There's really a lot of movements out there right now. Again, it was different when I came out of that life. There wasn't a lot of awareness. There wasn't a lot of safe houses. The Safety Harbor Act bill wasn't even passed yet, as I spoke to you about. So, you know, these are things that now, you know, there's a lot more help for the victims. So my best answer for you is to get involved with a movement, because we can't do this alone. This is not a one-man job. It's not something that we can just say, okay, right, I'm going to do it by myself. So get involved in a movement, an organization, and bring awareness, and also be diligent, with the people around you.
Yeah.
You know, spread awareness that way. Friends, family, anybody that you have a direct impact in your life, you know, you can spread the word about awareness, you know. So educate yourself and then educate others. That's a great way to start.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Kim, you know, the final way the way we close this is to ask, what biblical principles or passages have influenced your thinking about this today?
So I have a lot. I've had my life scriptures that I stand on, and then I have my action scriptures that I've stand on. And some of the obvious ones was Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. Philippians 4:13, you know, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Yeah.
And there, you know, there's a few more that I also hold on to in that area too. Ecclesiastes 4:1, a lot of people don't think about that, you know. And it talks about the oppressed and seeing their tears, you know, and nobody doing nothing. And then I have my action verses. Isaiah 61, beauty for ashes. You know, he has called me and anointed me for a time such as this, to go out and to heal the brokenhearted and to bind up their wounds. You know, that's something I stand on. I have a couple other scriptures that I stand on. Proverbs 31:8-9. Speak up for those who are caught up in injustice, who are being led to their slaughter daily. He tells us right there in his word. He knows. He knew from the very beginning of the time, 2,000 years ago. Slavery started happening in the book of Genesis. This is not brand new. He told us all along in his word, this is happening. Be my disciples. Take action. Do something.
Yeah.
But we have to actually get up and move.
Discover who you're called to be at Biola University, a leading Christ-centered university in Los Angeles, with programs on campus and online. Subscribe for more of our videos and learn more at biola.edu.